Baba knows the way. For Joseph Baba Ifa, Baba knows the way. We follow the signs. He walks with the Orisha through sacred lines. He speaks with the ancients. He honors the drum. He carries the wisdom where we all come from.
Hey family, thank you for tuning in to Our Roots podcast with Joseph Baba Ifa. Where only the strongest roots see the light, brought to you by Botaniga Candles and more. And if you haven't had the opportunity, hit that subscribe button. Now, Phil, I think this channel, we've gotten far too bad of a rap, and I think we're going to change public opinion. Today's episode is called Shango, King of Kings.
Shango, King of Kings?
So we're going to put some respect on his name. Yeah, no surprise here. We're going to put some respect on Shango's name. And we're going to go over all the reasons why he is viewed as the king of the religion. But first, let's talk about that membership program.
Yeah, man. Speaking of being the king of this religion, we've surpassed 1,600 videos.
Really?
I don't know if you guys knew that.
That's regal.
But that's a lot of videos.
Yeah, that's a lot of content.
Right?
Yeah, it'll be there forever.
And you know, we've been doing our membership program for about 3 years now.
Yeah. So
that means there's a lot of videos in there that most people haven't seen, right? Because our membership program is exclusive. So only a few people, everyone's invited, but only a few people are actually in the group. Yeah. So it's really easy. All you have to do is hit the join button. It's the button directly under this video. It gives you access. We have 3 separate tiers. Each tier is offering its own set of perks, whether it's early releases, discounts on merch or classes or courses, podcast episodes just for members, videos just for members. Joseph is going to be answering a lot of these questions in the YouTube comments. It's going to be going a little bit more deeper instead of just leaving like a sentence. But these are going to be member-only videos. So if you have a question that you want to ask and you think you really want it featured in the our members' videos, make sure you ask them in the comments. It could be anything, really. But we're going to go through all those. But that's going to be just for the members. So it's going to be really, really fun. We're adding a lot more content just for the members, and we would love for you to come.
Absolutely, guys. And if you're in there and know somebody that can gain some value, be sure to let them know. And be sure to be on the lookout for those workshops. Get in there. If you haven't yet, we're visiting Atlanta and New York this year, and we're very excited about all the interactions we're going to be having and all the material we're going to cover.
I need to give you my camera for when you go, just so you can get some content.
I'm excited, man.
Actually, I should come with y'all because I quit my job. So
not at all right.
You know what I'm saying? I quit my job. Wait, when you going again? You going in?
It's kind of sad. I don't remember off the top of my head.
It was June, right?
August, something like that.
Yeah. Man, I'm gonna go with you.
Yeah, let's roll, dog. We need a vacation, Phil. We work too hard, and you know, I heard Atlanta's a good vibe, and New York. Oh man, we're gonna go visit some family. You know what I'm saying?
We have to go to Casa Delicatessen, though.
Yeah, we do. We got to go to Houston Street over there, get a nice pastrami,
yeah.
right? A little mustard. Yeah. It's exciting stuff. So we're gonna be all right. And to speak about Shango, we have to speak about who came before Shango, because Shango's like regal thread of DNA goes all the way back to the beginning. So, and the beginning is the Odudua Baba. So to be able to speak about Shango, we have to speak about a gentleman named Odudua. So Odudua, not that this video is about Odudua, but we're gonna have to get into a little bit of the origin myth, because Shango's like pedigree goes all the way back to creation. So Odudua, right? When you look at the creation myth within Ayobe, there's versions where it was Obatala who came down from heaven on the chain. And there's other versions where it was Odudua, right? This immaculate story that speaks of when, you know, Odudua descended, you know, upon earth. There's versions in the Odudua Baba Ifa where he actually descended upon the king palm, or the palm tree, which was his first home. Neither here nor there. They say that once he arrived and Earth was created and human beings and all these different things, he himself started procreating. So there's a couple different versions on that. So forgive me. If it's frustrating for the viewer, I mean, as a scholar, it'll drive you insane until you let go of the desire to be correct. So there's one version where he had one son, where the son's name was Okangbi, which means one was born, right? Then there's another version where he had 7 sons. And then there's another version where he had 16 sons.
Oh.
And that those 16 sons became the 16 kings of Yoruba land under the supreme ruler ship of Ife, right? Being that Odudua was the first Oni of Ife, or the first Onife. The word Oni means crocodile. So he's the crocodile Ife, or the central ancestor. But there's also another version where it speaks of his first son being a gentleman named Oramiyang. Now, why is all of this really key? Well, when you go to various Odus, principally mine, Irete Suka, it speaks of Odudua's life story as well, where the traditional celestial creation myth of Odua being the supreme ruler of Ife, which is seen as the cradle of civilization and the first establishment. It's known as Ile Ife, which means the house of love, because it's where people started loving each other. And from that, society and civilization actually descended. I remember when I was actually studying Yoruba with my teacher, Olabisi, I remember asking her what the word abure meant, because in Cuba we say abure. But the Yoruba word for brother is aburo, which really means descendant of my father. So I remember when I told her that, she said, that's how Ife is referred to. It's known as Ife Abure, which means we have enough to share. So it means the house of love where we share. So it's a place where people would go to be able to find that support and where everyone emanated from. So not to get too lost in this spider web of creation, you have that myth where Odudua descended and was king on earth, and everything descended from there, and all the lineages descended from him. So we have that one, right, which is celestial history. Then there is another version where it speaks of Odudua actually being from the city of Benin, or Bini, within Yoruba land. Now, this is a hotly debated topic, Phil, where it puts to the closed-minded person each version's version in critique, right, or under scrutiny, where the closed-minded person might look and be like, well, one trumps the other, when in reality, it is a reiteration when it comes to Shango, because there's a version where Odudua was actually one of the lost princes known as Ekaladehang, from Benin City, also known as Bini, right? And that he traveled from his natal land due to a scandal that had occurred with his father, Owodo, who was an Ogiso, or a sky king over there, is known as the Ogiso dynasty. And when you actually look into the history of Benin, it's a pretty incredible place. I mean, it was where bronze casting was very developed and innovated, to the point where some of those bronzes, as they're known, are being returned, I believe, from Cambridge to Africa after they were, stolen. And then you also have the Great Benin Wall, which they say was comparable to that of the Great Wall of China, depending on how you measure it. So they say that he was originally one of the lost princes of this land, and he was actually excommunicated from it in a very, very, ugly way, where he was accused of things, where, he was seen as either the legitimate or illegitimate son of the last Sky King, Owodo. And then there was another version that he entered into conflict with one of the other wives of his father, and she wanted, their child, if they were able to create one, to be the next crown holder. But, the last heir was actually Ekaladehang. So because of it, he was excommunicated from his land, and there was a curse placed on it for him, where they say there was this famous sacrifice that occurred where a rat was given to the land and said, you'll never cross this line again. So he left and he started heading west, right? And there's versions in the same Odu of Baba Ifa that say that on this trek, now mind you, one thing is celestial history, another thing is anthropological history, and then we also have Ifa history. This is actually scripture within the Lukumi tradition. So it says that when he was coming from the east, which is where Benin City lies, towards Ife, which was further west, he started having revelations and dreams of crowning processes and things he had seen, things he had not seen. And when he arrived in Yoruba land, a divination had been performed, presumably the Odu of Eyobe or Irete Suka. It's also in the Odu of Obetwani Alara, where it speaks of the Onife position, etc., where when this gentleman arrived, Ifa told them to induct him as their king, right? Now, this is, once again, hotly debatable, or debated or polemic, but they say that one of the historical reasons why they would have done this is because being that he was somebody from the outside that didn't have all of the bias and political ties as some of the infighters or infighting that was occurring there, is why they elected him, so they could have a completely neutral person who was very innovative and had great ideas and divine providence. Now, another point that I'm going to make, which is a point that is actually recognized within Shango's mythology, is that he was viewed as the reincarnation of Odudua on Earth, and that's why he was ultimately inducted as the Onife, right, or King of Ife, which is the same thing that happened with Shango when we get into the story of Abiafing, because Abiafing was not the original Shango. He was somebody that was recognized as having that spirituality of Shango so prevalent within him, and all this divine providence of his birth, being that he was born on Ojo Jakuta or Ajaka, where you know, he had all these qualities and traits where they said this is Shango once more. So the same thing could have happened with Ekalat Dehang being Odudua, right? But why does all of this matter per se? The reason being is because when Odudua arrives in Ife, whether you look at it from a celestial standpoint or an anthropological standpoint, because the people of Bini, you know, which was ancestrally known as Igodo Migodo, they only have one version of this story, right? When with Ekalat Dehang, where when you look at, you know, spiritual, ancestral, you know, literature or divine creation myth, there's multiple versions of what happened there, where these people only have one historical account, which hasn't been disproven either. And once again, I just want to state for everybody watching, I have no bias towards any of these, to be frank with you, because I think they're both beautiful and enriching, and I think it's meant to be a point of commonality and unity rather than, you know, debate, which we're never going to know because no one was ever there. But neither here nor there, Odudua had a son, right? And that son was Oramiyang. Now, based on what occurred with Benin, right, or Bini as it was known, Odudua never was going to go back there because he had been cursed, and you know, he was never going to risk his life once again for people that had gotten rid of him. But something happened over there where they needed somebody to reestablish the sacred bloodline to be able to maintain legitimacy. And being that Odudua wasn't going to go, even though there is literature where in some versions it did occur, the more popular version is that he sent his son Oramiyang, right? So when Oramiyang goes over there, he has a son, which begins the Oba dynasty, leaving the Ogiso dynasty for the Oba dynasty of a gentleman that he creates known as Eweka the First, right? And he has it with a native-born woman over there, and he leaves it established, and he goes and continues his life. Now, Oramiyang is interesting because he is really the nucleus of all of the regalness in Yoruba land, where in Irete Suga, when you read the story of the son of sacrifice, or the story of Onife, which when translated could possibly mean he who is in need or the adopted one, Odudua in that sign, my sign, actually adopted a boy. And the boy was originally supposed to be sacrificed because Odudua would consume people. This is in the Odu of Irete Meyi, Irete Suga, where human sacrifice was commonplace in ancient Yoruba land and ancient Africa, and luckily is now severely taboo, as it should be, being that it is cursed. But at this point, Odudua was going to continue this. Now, the reason he did not was because he had had a dream. In one version, it was of a boy that he was going to, you know, have sacrificed to him. But the boy had a mark on his posterior, you know, in his lower back, you know, area. And when they went to sacrifice the boy, he saw the same mark. So he said, I think we're going to end this now because I think God's trying to tell me something. There's another version where, you know, a woman was going to be sacrificed to him. And this is speaking of the path of Odudua Alabuweye, which means he who covers himself in rotten blood and washes himself in rotten blood was going to sacrifice a pregnant woman. And he said, I can't do this because there's a baby in there. So he stopped the practice altogether. And it kind of reiterates what Irete Meyi speaks of with the story of Poroye. to pause here real quick, the interesting point is this is the same scandal that we have in the literature of Irete Sukan, the Lukumi paperwork, and this is the same scandal that Owodo, or Ekala de Hangs or Odua's father in Benin, was going to be stripped of his crown because he was going to sacrifice a pregnant woman. So it's ironic that historically they line up with our celestial information here, not discrediting anything else that's being said, but remember that we're dealing with multiple universes, not universes, but timelines, parallel realities, all these different things. But ironically, their version lines up with what the Lukumi have. So it might be that we're descendants of them and we have a huge Benin influence, whether it's Benin City, which is obviously different from Benin Country, which was named in honor of them. But neither here nor there. When this happens, Odudua raises the adopted boy. He makes his mother a servant within the house, and he raises the boy. And Odudua had a son, and in the paperwork of Irete Suga, it says the gentleman's name was Shango or Banifa, which means Shango is the king in Ifa, when in reality, it's speaking about Oramiyang. Being that Oramiyang, there's a very key piece of information there that speaks of the twin concept between Oramiyang and Oranife, which we'll get into momentarily. But ultimately, it's speaking of Odua's son, who was Shango, who was really the ancestral Oramiyang in this case. So they raised him, they initiated him as Babalawo. His Odu ended up being Esekangola. His adopted brother, Shango, or Oramiyang, better said, taught him the arts of Ifa. His adopted father, Odudua, taught him the arts of Ifa, taught him the regal way. And he was basically blood. He was family, right? But he wasn't actually Odua's direct blood descendant through procreation. So when things change and all of this happens with Oramiyang and Bini, and Odudua is getting older, and they say another reason he never went back was because he went blind, Oramiyang and Onife have a conversation, right? And Oramiyang tells his adopted brother that he didn't want to continue reigning in Ife. He didn't want to just be a spiritual guy or an Oba spiritually, or reign as the Onife or the spiritual leader of his people. He didn't want to continue their father's work like that. He wanted to be a warrior king. He wanted to expand the empire, expand his interests. After, basically continuing the line once again in Benin City, he wanted to, do so across Yoruba land, right, and expand it. So he looked at his brother and said, "You're the only person I trust with our father. He's older, he's frail, he's blind, and you know him and he trusts you better than anybody. He might trust you more than me because he knows you don't have the ambition I do, as far as, from a war standpoint." So he said, "I'm going to leave you in his care. And the day he transitions, I want you to become the king of Ife, right? And everyone will pledge allegiance to you, and you will be the embodiment of what our father was. I will reign from wherever I conquer," right? And that place that he ended up conquering was the land of Oyo, right? So that's why when you actually look at the overall picture regally in Yoruba land, the actual blood descendant, based on the literature that's been provided and spiritually and Odu Ifa and all these other things of Odua, was the descendants of Oramiyang, who are the Alafings of Oyo, right? Alafing means owner of the palace, ultimately. So those are the actual blood descendants of the of Odua, technically. Just like those people's descendants are the ones in Benin City, but also our ancestors may come from there as well. But the king of Ife is not the blood descendant of Odua, but he is also seen as the representation of Odua on earth, because he was the one who exemplified the qualities Odua had spiritually and regally better than anyone. And that's why to be able to be inducted as king in Yoruba land, you have to pledge allegiance to Ife, to never maraud or betray Ife. That's why when you look at Alafings, like I believe his name was Awole, which is the famous story in Ikakana or Ocheni Lobe, when he tried to maraud upon Ife and everyone, turned on him because this was seen as a lunatic's idea. That shows you how strong the pact and the oath was. So pretty big prelude to what's to come. So now that we have all this divine ancestry explained and things like that, now we kind of get to the Odu of Okanamei, right? So we have Oramiyang, right? The first Alafing technically was the first Oba of Bini as well, being that he was the one who came, organized it, and left Eweka as king, and that dynasty still stands and proceeds till this day. From that came other Alafings or descendants, and it's debatable. Shango was either number 3 or 4. In the Lukumi practice, he's always been known as the 4th Alafing of Oyo. I've seen lists where he was number 3. Whatever, he was in that space. But there's a story in Okanamei from an Isheshe standpoint that is very interesting because it speaks of the birth of Shango. When we look at the Lukumi tradition, Okanrangmeji or Okanameji is seen as the Saraye or Isalaye of Shango, where Shango descended upon earth. When in Isheshe, it's pretty much the same thing as well. But it speaks a very interesting concept that the person that is recognized as the actual Shango till this day wasn't necessarily the first one, that he was a gentleman that was born in the palace as a royal descendant on the day of Ojo Shango or Ojo Jakuta, right? The word Jakuta meaning stone thrower, or could be translated from Ajaka as well, one of the Alafings. And he exemplified Shango's characteristics in an even more fierce and intense fashion, to the point where he actually was known as Shango from that point forward. Now, the reason I bring that point up is because the same thing could have happened with Odudua with Ekalat Dehang. But neither here nor there. It's a concept that is seen where, when based on time, situation, divine providence, and characteristics, somebody might be recognized more as an Orisha than the Orisha we knew previously. So there's multiple cases of this, just extraordinary people with divine timing who were identified and deified till this day. So if we're talking about Shango as King of Kings and why Shango is the king of the religion, even from a terrestrial standpoint, he was born into regal divinity. He was born in the palace. He was born on the ancestral day of his energy. He was given the name Shango, or ultimately Abiafing, which means he who was born in the palace, and became known as Shango himself. All of these different things. And thus comes Shango's life story, whether it's through Isheshe or Lukumi, where there are so many common points. So when you look at Okanamei from an Isheshe standpoint, it speaks of that, where the boy was a born king. Now, when you look at Odu Ifa and all the different versions of Shango's birth, there's quite a few. One of the more popular ones is that he ultimately was the result of an affair that occurred between his mother, Oshanla, right, and the Orisha Agayou. So the famous story is that when Oshanla had to cross the river, she didn't have any money, and Agayou was the boatman. And, she decided to offer tribute with something other than currency, such as cowrie, and they had an affair. And from that, she became pregnant. Now, she was officially married to Obatala, and Obatala looked at the timelines and things like that. He's like, oh, you're pregnant, that's great. But when the boy was born, he kind of looked, he said, man, he don't look like me. But,
oh, no.
But he kept it moving. He loved the boy. He looked at him, he said, he's everything I'd want in a son. But he don't look like me, So rumors started going around as Shango got older, that he wasn't Obatala's legitimate son, and this started really hurting his heart. So he went to his father and he said, am I your son? And Obatala looked at him and he said, my boy, to me, you are of my cloth. You're my son. I don't care what nobody says, but you might want to ask your mom. So he went running to his mother and he said, is Obatala my father? And she said, son, I don't know how to explain this to you. You might want to go see Orula. So everybody was tossing the poor thing around. Emotionally, it must have been
Confusion,
a real wreck. Yeah, completely. So he went running to Orumila, and Orumila revealed the Odu Okankrang Meji, where Ifa told him to perform sacrifice and to take it to the volcano, right? Or an eruption, because volcanoes aren't in Africa. Well, I'm sure there's a hole over there that, has some magma or something like that. Anywho, he goes. Remember, mountains ancestrally could have been volcanoes. So when he goes there and he drops the ebo into the volcano, he falls in. So inside, Agayou is looking and he says, oh my God, this person's fallen in. They're dead. But when he got up, Agayou looked and said, oh, something's not making sense here. He said, boy, who are you? He said, my name is Shango. And he said, well, what do you want? What are you doing here? How are you so resilient to fire? And he said, Orumila said, wherever I drop my ebo is where I'd find my father, so you must be my father. And Agayou said, bro, I don't got no kids. And,
Try again.
Whenever I think of Agayou, I'm like, he gives me the vibe of like a Ving Rhames. I'm like, I don't know, just very stern and things like that. So Agayou got a little impatient with him and spit fire at him, right? He threw magma at him and, all these other things. And Shango was completely resilient to it. So he said, let me try that again. And he said he spewed at him 3 times and the boy was completely unharmed. And he said, this kid must be my kid, man, because there's nobody else who could resist this temperature if he wasn't. So they sat down and they had a conversation, and Agayou spilled the beans. He said, yeah, if your mom's Ochanla, it's very possible. And, I'm sorry, I don't want no problems with your father, who I'm not a fan of, by the way, because Agayou and Obadala have never been on good terms. But yes, me and your mother did have an encounter, right, an entanglement. And it seems like you're a result of that, So Shango wanted to build a relationship with Agayou. He was a little scared because of Obadala. And Obadala, he was so self-confident. He said, my son, I just want you to know who you are. Just know that you're always blessed by me. You'll always be my son. You always have a right to my crown. But go meet your father. Go get to know him and go understand yourself more, because I think there's other aspects of you that you need to learn about to be able to deal with yourself. Because Shango was a very aggressive youth. He was a very impetuous youth. I mean, when we look at his name, Shango means I hit with permission. We're talking about a gentleman that, I don't even want to say, just spoiled. He was privileged. He was enabled. And I think that was his biggest obstacle, is that everything was given to him from the very beginning. So it's easy to criticize his later behaviors, but I mean, if you really look at, if you enable a child throughout his life, you can only expect him to make mistakes later. And another thing is he had the character of a ram. So, they're not going to listen very much. So that's the version that the Lukumi really goes with. I actually saw a documentary recently that says Shango was actually one of the sons of Yemoja as well, her being the mother of the world. But those are more Isheshe concepts. But there are stories where Yemaya was his mother as well. But just to go with the different topics that we're going to be touching on in here, I'd like to stick with the Agayou theme, because Agayou here is seen as his father, right? But in antiquity, if you actually look at the Alafing who came after Shango, his name was Aganju, right? Now, when you look at the concept of Koso, as I like to say it, you have the actual town of Koso, where they say that ancestrally Shango's energy comes from, and the Alafings have to go to be able to initiate their crowning process, right? So you actually have the word Koso as a town, but the word Koso means did not hang or did not tie. So Shango has always been famously known as Obakoso, either the king of Koso or the king who did not hang. So whenever you look at any of the Odus within the Lukumi Ifa that end in Koso, whether it's Otruponkoso, Funkoso, Obarakoso, or Iworikoso, it speaks of the story we're going to get into now, where Shango was king, but he preferred performing Ogu, which was seen as negative witchcraft or negative medicines or taboos, rather than Ifa work, right? And his wife, Oya, right, in some versions, and mostly the one I go with, but it could have been Oba, I think it might have been Oya, told him to not persist upon this and to focus upon his regal duties as king. And as Babalawo, being that he was initiated as well, but Shango didn't listen, and in one fatal mistake, he blew up the palace, killed his whole family, and, lit everything ablaze.
Great.
Horrible, yeah. So, due to the shame, he went running into the jungle to kill himself, to hang himself. You can also find a story like this in the Odu of Ogunda Tatura, or Ogunda Tasya, or Ogunda Otura. And when he went to hang himself, in some versions, he succeeded, right? So very sad. Where there's this other version where he kind of remained in purgatory for 3 days and then resurrected. I don't know if there's some other influences from other spiritualities there, or maybe they got it from us. But there is a version like that where he resurrected. Really? There's another version where, when he passed away, his brother, Aganju, who they said was his twin brother, which also brings in a whole nother level of complexity with him because of the whole Ibeji concept, that they went to Koso to actually get his twin brother, who was next in line for the crown, who was Aganju, to bring him to take up the crown because, other people were trying to usurp the crown and sit on it and sit on the throne and take and all these other things. So they say that when Agayou came riding in on the horse or whatever he came riding in on, the ram, whatever, they started yelling Obakoso, whether it meant king of Koso or it meant the king did not hang, because they were looking at Shango once again, even though they knew Shango had died, because Agayou looked exactly like him because it was his twin, right? So that's one version there where also they could have been brothers, and actually they say they were, from a historical standpoint. And that's why I tell everybody, you have celestial history, you have anthropological history, and they don't have to trump each other or negate each other. I think we just need to maintain the open-mindedness of, we really don't know, so that's super key. We can only go based off what our ancestors left us, and usually the winners write history. So, because that's why it's called his story, the only guy that survived. Okay. Then there's another version where Shango tried to suicide, and Orula and Eshu caught him before his neck got fractured. So, he was begging with them, and he said, please let me die. I can't deal with my shame. I've killed my woman. I've killed my children. I can't come back from this. And they said, you have to. This is the first time in your life and most critical time in your life where you're going to be accountable, right? And they basically took him through a rehab, and they worked him back up, and they got him back in stride to where when he came back, his enemies were executed. They feared him. Everyone started yelling, Kaviesi Obakoso, Your Highness, the king did not hang, and he was able to sit on his throne. And this is one of the key themes with Shango, and, a word to the wise of all the children of his that want to be wise. It's a huge learning moment. The reason Shango is ultimately king of the religion is because nobody can say anything about Shango that has not been said. When we're talking about somebody who lived completely on his sleeve, it was this Orisha. People would come up to him and be like, yeah, you killed your whole family. He's like, yes, I did, but I'm still your king. Or, yeah, you did this. He's like, I did. He never lied. He always kept it a buck, because at the end of the day, he knew that regardless of whatever he had done, God had put him in this position to be present and to reign. So that means if someone has anything to say about you, you confront it. You become accountable for it. You don't try to hide from it, per se. And that's
like Eminem. I am whatever you say I am.
I am whatever you say I am. And that's Shango perfect, because Shango, everyone tried to slander him or bring up his past or his past life and all these other things. And he's like, yeah, all of that. Yeah, I'm not hiding from none of it, but I'm still the king. So what are you going to say to me? So that's why he's ultimately the king of the religion. And then when you go to even deeper in the Odudua Bokana Meji, it speaks of the famous story with the ram, right? And there's so many patagis that we're going to go over. I mean, Shango, at least in this story, his name was Jakuta. Now, Jakuta means stone thrower. There was an alafing, I believe, before the chronological order of Shango that was known as Ajaka. So they kind of are synonymous, right? Or there's one way to say the name, another way to say the name, condensed or so or not. But in this story, he was known as Jakuta, right? It might have been because they say that Shango himself was a reincarnation of this energy, whether it was obviously his ancestor, chronologically and biologically, or ancestrally. They say that is the root energy of Shango in heaven, and that he manifested on earth in what we know now. Anywho, Jakuta was best friends with Abbo, or the ram, and they had a business selling fruit, right? So they noticed that inventory was low, something wasn't making sense. They came to a conclusion that someone was stealing from them. So they went to Oromela. Okana Meji was revealed, and Ifa told them to perform sacrifice with a basket of fruit and leave it at 4 corners and wait until they saw the thief. So they did that, but after hours, the ram started falling asleep. The story says that he suffered from narcolepsy. So Shango looked at the ram and said, bro, I'm done. I got to go meet this girl. We're going on a date. I'll leave you here. You have all my trust. I'm out. Let me know how it goes so we can go hunt this guy down. And the ram was like, I got you. But the ram, after Shango left, he nodded off. So the ram heard a bustle, and when he looked up, he saw a guy in red cloth running away with the basket of fruit. It was his friend Jakuta. He's like, bro, this guy's been robbing from me this whole time. This guy's my best friend. He told me he was going to go on a date. The reason was Shango saw the ram starting to fall asleep, And he would do the same thing every time. The ram would fall asleep, he'd steal fruit and
he
go
would
make money on his own.
Take it. Oh wow. Okay, so he'd take advantage of him.
Yeah, he was messed up, you know. Kind of like a paid in full situation, right?
Yeah, oh yeah.
You know, Shango was Rico. So, the ram knew now that Jakuta was a thief, but what everybody found out afterwards, after the king died, was that Jakuta was actually the prince of Oyo, and he was going to become Alafing now. He was going to become the king. So his new name was Shango, right? He who hits hard, right? El que lleva la cosa recia. Like he was very rough. He was very strict. And, you know, he was trying to put on this front, but the ram knew and had told everybody that, hey, the person you worship now is your king, and Alafing of Oyo was once known as Jakuta, and he was a thief. Now, this was a huge blasphemous claim. That was true. And Shango was being confronted with it, and he had no way to defend himself. So he started raining hellfire upon earth. You know, he started enacting laws that were ridiculous, curfews, like it was just a real mess. So they did divination. Okanamei came out, and, you know, it said that it had to do with Shango. So they just asked him, they said, bro, what do you want? Because you're destroying earth. And he said, the only way I'll relax, the only way I'll be at ease is if you sacrifice Abbo to me, or the ram. So there was only one ram, his ex-best friend, and Shango would never go head-to-head with the ram because he knew he couldn't do it. You know, the ram would destroy him. He sent his royal guard to go get him. So they kidnapped the ram, they brought him into the room, and, you know, Shango started singing the famous Firolo, 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 Bale, you know, pin him to the floor, pin him to the floor. Murele, 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 bale. Put this in his mouth. Don't let him talk. And then, you know, the famous song that follows, and then they ultimately sacrificed him, right? But when the ram was dying and being sacrificed, a tear fell out of his eye because he looked at his best friend and he wondered, how did we get to this point? But he told him, he said, whether it's in heaven, whether it's in limbo, or whether it's in hell, I'll always tell everybody how you were a thief, you know? And that's why sometimes you'll see at the drum, they'll sing, Hemiole, Haraole, Hemiole, means I'm a thief, I'm a thief. The whole town knows I'm a thief. So everybody knew Shango was a descarao, as we like to say, or somebody without a face. He had no dignity. But at the same time, he was still the king, so you had to deal with it, you know? But, you know, it's a perfect example. Once again, he wore his life on his sleeve. He's like, yeah, you want to talk about corruption? I'm as corrupt as it gets. But what are you going to do? You know, I'm the king, you know? So it was one of those things where Olodumare would kind of look down and he'd be like, what can I do with this kid? You know what I'm saying? He was destined for this. And that's why he really is the king of the religion, because he did whatever he wanted and he got away with it, good or bad. Now, I will say that it wasn't, you know, a complete lack of remorse, because as we get into further patakis, you know, he learns from these mistakes and things like that, and he grows from them. But it was every mistake that made him the success that he ended up being. So, I mean, from Okanamei, you know, even though it's the sign that comes before it, you could look at concepts like Obaramei as well. The word Obara means king of the land, right? So whether you're talking about number 6 in the shell or Obarameji, the sign of Ifa, it's definitely talking about Shango. Within Obara is the proverb, the king does not lie. From the lie, the truth is born. And there's a famous story there where Shango walked outside of the palace and he said, man, the sky is so beautifully green today. And all of his subjects looked at him and said, or one of them, you know, one who was not, you know, astute, said, Your Highness, you're mistaken. The sky is blue. And he said, off with his head. And he was executed like Alice in Wonderland.
Jeez, okay.
So Shango looked again and said, how beautifully green the sky is today. Is it not? And everyone said, Your Highness, we've never seen a sky as emerald and beautiful as today.
Oh,
and he said, Doi bang eshu.
Oh, my God.
Whatever the king says is law. So very, very indicative story there, because what does it say? Don't outshine the master. Law of power for sure. It was another example of the king does not lie. Even if it's a lie, it becomes the truth, because to go against him, you know, makes no sense. It's unproductive. So that's one concept of there, further reinforcing Shango as a Bakini Bar, King of Kings. But then you also have another story where it speaks of Shango was now going to become the Alafin of Oyo, right? And, based on tradition, he had to initiate into the ancestral mysteries of those that came before him, right? Initiate into Shango, right? Or whatever that ultimately meant at that moment. So he's going through his process. This is a Lukumi story, so it was a 7-day process, right? And they say that in another room next to his, he heard other things going on. And he looked and said, what ceremony is occurring over there? And they said, no, they're performing Itelodu. They're performing, an initiation of a man as a babalawo. And Shango said, well, I'm going to be honest with you. That sounds more interesting to me than this. I've dominated this room already. I'm the king of this room, right? And they're like, oh, yeah. And he's like, well, I'm a little bored. I'd like to go to the next one right now. And they were like, Your Highness, you can't do that. You have to wait a year. You have to go through things. We have to, inaugurate you, and you have a bunch of appointments and things like that. And Shango said, I'm the king, right? And they were like, oh, yeah. He said, so I do what I want. And he left the room of Orisha, and they say that he kicked down the door of Ifa, and he walked in, and he said, now you have to do Ifa to me. And so now they're running around. They do Ifa to him. He comes with the Odu Obaramei. Like, it's just a wild scene, but you'd expect nothing less. So that's why Obaramei is known as Obarameji, the king of two lands, right? Because he was the king of Orisha, and he is the king of Ifa. For any versed Babalawo, especially from a Lukumi standpoint, we understand the magnitude that Shango is and how, he really runs it, dog. I mean, you got to give it up. It's just one of those situations where, to the point where whenever Shango gives a positive response in the coconut or abong, or in the orobo, being that he really doesn't accept obiabada, whenever he gives a positive response, no matter how many times it is, everybody has to hit the ground and forehead and kiss the ground. Whenever he gives a positive response, because he's that gully,
Yeah, so let us know in the comments what you think of Shango. I'm sure that's everyone's favorite.
No, he's the man. Shango's the man. I mean, what time are we at?
It's we're over 40 minutes.
Yeah, I still got more. More.
Let's hear it, man.
I got a couple more just to reinforce the theme.
But still, let us know in the comments.
No, for sure. But I mean, it's definitely a theme that goes on. Because being that dynasty is still alive, we're still writing history as we speak. And, the magnitude of Shango can really be seen in the Odu of Obetua, or Obe Alara, or Obe Otun Ni Alara. When we translate Obe Otun Ni Alara, it basically means Obe sits at the right hand and is Alara, right? Or the right hand of God, right? Alara means he who carries the lightning bolt. So what occurred is in the Odu of Obetua, Olodumare was a little paranoid. He didn't feel like he could trust anybody. He didn't feel like he could delegate to anybody. He felt like, it was just him, and no one understood him, and no one understood his plans and the grand scheme of the universe, and he felt like he was being betrayed. So he went for divination. And it's one of the Odus where, Olofing or Olodumare actually received divination, because he was like, I don't know what to do. So that's a really key theme here is, everyone received divination from Orumila, whether it was Eshu, God Almighty, whatever it was. Ultimately, nature is outside of your control until you get the clarity from the oracle. So Obe Alara was revealed, or Obe Ola, and Orumila told Olodumare that he had to make sacrifice and provide it to Shango. And when they were around each other, Olodumare explained what was going on, and he said, Father, if you allow me to, I will ensure that your will be done. Just give me the power. Give me the space. And there's nothing I won't make happen for you. There's nothing that I can't facilitate. And I will make sure that everyone understands your mission, and whoever falls outside of that line will be punished, right? And Olodumare was motivated, and he said, I want you to be Otung. I want you to be my right hand. I want you to be present always. And till this day, he is. He is the right hand of God. Like, this is how epic this guy is. And that's why he is seen and feared and respected, but feared more than anything, because they say that when a lightning bolt strikes somebody or strikes things, or that whole concept comes from the punishment of Shango, fire, all of these elements that are without control and without parallel, or without opponent, is Shango. And that's why, he was seen as the most paramount Orisha. Even though Eshu makes everything possible, who kind of keeps everything under control and supervision, or who is the prosecutor of God, is Shango himself. And that's in the Odu of Obetwa. So once again, there is no Orisha that necessarily compares when we talk about regalness and influence within our practices. Because without Shango, nothing gets that stamp of approval, because he is seen as the emissary directly of Olodumare. And Obe Alara stipulates this. And then when you look at the Odu of Obebara, it's the Odu of the double crown, where Obatala was getting older, Shango was getting older, natural course of things. Shango had learned quite a bit from Obatala, from life, from his mistakes. He was having some issues with his public, and he went to visit his father, and he explained, Dad, I'm going through this. You're getting older. I need to be prepared for when you're not here. I need as much advice as I can get. I need everything you can give me, because I don't know if I'm going to be able to fill your shoes. I mean, you're so loved and you're so respected, and I'm more feared. I'm a little more aggressive than you are. I move at a different pace. I don't know if these people are going to be able to assimilate me without you being here. And Obadallah said, you've learned what you can on your own. Now it's time for me to give you the best part of me. And that's when he gave him, the famous white bead, turning Shango's necklace red and white. Shango bowed before Obatala. Obatala crowned him the second time, giving him his crown as well. And that's where Shango became King of Kings. He became Obakiniba because of not only the approval from Obatala, but also the approval from Odudua, right? There's another Odu, another story in an Odu known as Idete Ansari, Idete Musa, which speaks of Odudua being Shango's godfather, right? Even though technically it was either his father, great-grandfather, whichever chronology you want to follow, spiritually or anthropologically, historically. But Odudua was actually the Orisha that initiated Shango into Ifa. And it's in the Odu Videte Hansa. It's one of the Odus where Shango became Babalawo. And one of the Odus where he crowned as well. So they do the Ifa. Shango comes with the Odu Videte Hansa. Everything's great. He's reigning in Oyo. And Odudua is reigning in Ife, right? But Shango progressively becomes more frustrated with his godfather Odudua, because Odudua doesn't visit him. And on an annual basis, they all visit him. Maybe it was the Olojo festival where all the Orishas are reenacted as paying homage, and all the kings pay homage to the Onife or the concept of Odudua, etc. Whatever it was, but the Onife or Odudua wouldn't visit Shango. So Shango started to feel insulted. And there's other versions of this story, like in Oyekumbiri Kusa, where Obatala wouldn't visit Shango either. Shango would get a little emotional. But with this one, he got very emotional. And he started raining hellfire on Earth. It became a serious issue to the point where Odudua had no idea what was going on, and had the council perform divination to, see what was occurring here. Idete Ansa was revealed, which he thought was peculiar, because that was his godson Shango's Odu. And it's said that the issue or the cause of it was Shango. And Odudua said, but why would Shango be destroying Earth? There's no reason for it. I mean, he has a crown. He's the man. He's progressive. The people, they admire him, And they said, well, the reason is because you haven't visited him. And he said, well, I mean, I'm an older man. I mean, I don't have the energy to be traveling across the country and things like that. Like, I'm his godfather. I mean, none for none. I mean, what are we talking about here? And they were like, well, if you don't kiss his feet, he's going to destroy Earth. And Odudua said, but I'm not going to do that. I mean, I'm God Almighty here. I'm Olofingaye. Like, what are we talking about? There's levels to this, And they were like, well, Mr. Levels, if you don't do it, we're all dead. So he held out, and it progressively got worse and worse and worse. It was looking like Avengers Endgame. And Odudua was like, oh my God, bro, I think I'm going to have to appease this guy's ego. I can't believe this. So he looked at Eshu and he said, you know where he is? He said, yeah, he's by the beach. Be careful. It's going to be a treacherous, walk. So when they made it, Shango was losing it. Fire coming out of the mouth, lightning, brimstone, hellfire, all these different things. And they were trying to get his attention, but he was so far gone in his rage that, it was coming to an end. And Elegua looked at Odudua and he said, please, Father, just do it, please, so we can come on. And Odudua did it. He laid at Shango's feet and he kissed his feet. And from the feeling of the kiss, Shango snapped out of it. And when he saw his godfather laying in front of him and the destruction and things like that, he immediately lifted him. And, they embraced and he apologized. And maybe there was some tears. I don't know how epic we want to get. But, he was like, I felt abandoned by you. And Odudua was like, you're not a boy anymore. You know what I'm saying? You're a king. People depend on you. People respect you. I'm always a message away. It's not that I didn't visit you because I didn't respect who you are and the man you've become. It's just, it's not personal, papi. And, but the act was done where, you had Supreme Olofin Aye Adimula Odudua, he bowed to Shango, thus making Shango's crown even above his, right? When you look at the concepts of the crowns of Ife or the Onife, right, which represents Odudua, and you look at the Alafing, which represented Oramiyang, Odudua is Odudua at the end of the day. We are Omo Odudua. We are the children of Odudua. But when you look at what Oramiyang and the Alafings and what they were able to accomplish with the expansion of Yoruba land and the culture and the military prowess and, you got positions like the Are or no Kankafo and all these, the Ares and the Bales and all these people. Like you look at, they did it in a way that no one's been able to do since. And then you look at the Pataki of Irete Ansa, where even Odudua bowed to his descendants, recognizing that he took the crown to another level. This is all evidence of Shango's title of Obakiniba, which, is King of Kings. We talk about the concept of Shango. We are the children of Shango, ultimately. We, within the Lukumi practice, are very Oyo-centric, where over there, when you initiate into Shango, that's it. No one goes above Shango. So that concept came to Cuba and to the Afro-diasporic descendancy, and why we only initiate into one Orisha. That's why when we receive the hand of Ifa, we ask which Orisha is the most convenient or the most necessary in this lifetime, because we're only going to do one. Like the Odu Eyobe Onle says, one king rules the land. But in Obaramei, one king ruled two of them, based on that concept. But neither here nor there, we ultimately are the descendants of Oyo. We have huge Ibadan influences, Oshobo influences, Benin influences from both of them. But ultimately Shango's influence upon all aspects of our spirituality cannot be overstated. And, my final message ultimately is, my love and admiration for this Orisha, because it takes a lot of courage throughout a lifetime or many lifetimes and generations for people to constantly be talking about your mistakes and still be able to have a reputation that's so outweighed that to the point where, we still hold him in this apex supreme position. My mother has crowned Shango. My grandmother was a daughter of Shango. One of my sons has crowned Shango. I've been able to, the gentleman that directed my Ifa was a son of Shango as well. I've been able to watch them, and in prime form, they really do whatever they want. I think the biggest obstacle for the children of Shango is self-control, understanding how to employ all of this power, because they are powerful people. But if we're not careful, power can be, unmeasured and cause harm. When we're able to control it and, use it for productive means, we can have electricity. We can have an oven. We can have light. We can have all the things that Shango brought, like the Odu Irosonche speaks of Kushe, which was another ancestral Shango path, where he brought fire down from the heavens, kind of like, the Promethean version in Greek mythology. Shango was all of this to us. So based on all of these things, this is why every Orisha, even Odudua, recognized him, and he was destined for greatness and success from the very beginning. So for all of his children, my compliments, my best wishes, because it is the hardest crown to carry, in my opinion. And if you know how to walk right with it, great things come. So, Kabosileo.
All right, man. Impressive.
Thank you, sir.
No, really.
Quite a
impressive.
dissertation.
Yeah.
But
I'm sure you could go even longer.
yeah, but pretty easy with an Orisha like this because it's really at the forefront of our mythology. And another point I'll make is, we're living in a time where people are looking for legitimacy, like the long lost Yoruba or Cuban bloodline, our creation myth versus y'all's, all these other things. I mean, it's really minute. When we focus so much on the specifics rather than the overall messages. And I think Ifa was constructed in this way to test the character of those and the mentality of those who really are going to learn something from it. You have a lot of people who agitate and people who are looking for this, this false sense of superiority based on whether it's resources, process, etc. We just need to focus on the moral. And the moral always was humility. Shango became king through humility. When he bowed to his father, Obadala, that's what exalted him to this next level. So on the path of legitimacy, we should not lose humility because at that point is when we go astray.
Yeah, well, you know what else doesn't go astray?
The members.
Our members.
Yes, sir.
Great episode. If you liked it, make sure you drop a comment. If you haven't yet, ask questions because these questions are going to be answered. If they're not already answered in the chat, if you want to go deeper, they're going to be a part of our membership program. So make sure you join our membership program. There are 3 different tiers. Each tier is offering different things. And whether it's extra episodes, discounts on merch, courses, classes, you name it.
Yep.
So this one, I'm going to show some love to our supporters, our basic level here.
Everybody
I'm
needs
going to show
support,
some love. Yeah, I'm going to show some love for our OGs for that. Right.
Love it.
All right. One of our episodes, we showed our OG members, but these are just some supporters here that have been here around 3 years. So I got Melted 77, they're a supporter, 36 months.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Guillermo, supporter, 33 months.
Yeah, muy buru.
Goju Bull, 32 months.
Thank you.
Richie Konga.
Oh, Rich.
32 months.
Oh, yeah.
We got 8131 Sana at 31 months.
Okay.
Barbara Powers at 30 months. Edward Rodriguez, 28 months.
Thank you, Ed.
Toon Easta at 22 months.
Yes.
Felipe Vasquez, 33 months.
Thank you, Felipe.
Jose Carmona at 18 months.
Nice.
And Elizabeth 8927 at 24 months. So cool, guys. Thank you.
Guys, we appreciate all the support. Let somebody know about the membership program. And we're going to see you at those workshops in Atlanta and New York. Can't wait. Well, DonnieGotCandlesandMore.com is up and running for all your product and service needs. We do ship. If you can't watch us on YouTube, be sure to catch us on any of the major podcast apps so you can hear us. Be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. A big thank you from all of us here at Our Roots Podcast. And until next time, family, see the light.
Baba Joseph showed the path today. Baba knows the way, we follow the signs. He walks with the Orisha through sacred lines. He speaks with the ancients, he honors the drum. He carries the wisdom where we all come from.